Slam poetry.
He doesn't care if it's perfect.
It's time to slam now.
It's the biggest poem I've got inside of me.
She was a thief. You run
To love means to love a haunted house.
Yelling, angry.
Blood-black nothingness began to spin.
Specific point of view on
To
things.
this day, I hate pork chops.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
If you think you can stop what we do, I doubt it. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you all enjoy The Spark, that song by the Irish kids from Cork, as much as I do. Welcome, everyone, to I Think Therefore I Slam. I'm your host, Andrew, coming to you from a very nice, very warm home office here with my guest today, John Englezos. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Andrew.
That's good.
It's wonderful to be here.
How did I go with the surname? I know.
Oh, look, you were leaning a little long on that middle syllable, but it's fine. We'll roll with Englezos. It's just Englezos. It's fine.
Did I go a bit too far?
No, you pronounced everything well. I'm not going to mock you on your first dance. You've done very good.
You got to dance with the one that brung you,
That's
as they say.
That's right.
Oh, John, we've got lots to chat about, lots of grist to get through. But how about we start with a spoken word piece? That's what we're here to do. So did you want to intro your first one?
No, I'll just jump in if that's okay.
Beautiful. When you're ready.
I will not be remembered for my words, or at least not the words I wish to be remembered for. Try as I may for my eloquence to have resonance, 100 years from now, these sincere scratches and screams shall suffer the shredder or the scrap heap, or be repurposed and reduced into some anonymized quote for someone else's newsfeed. All this sweat and strain shall be for naught. Time is just the sand I stand and stomp in, yet wind and waves will have their way. I will not be remembered for my words, any more than I will be remembered for my body. Could you imagine the hours it would take to erect an accurate monument for this man mountain? Is there enough marble in the world? There will be no plinth in the park for this boisterous bard. History will pay no heed to this chiseled jawline, to these sculpted abs, to this glowing Melbourne complexion. I will not be remembered for my body, any more than I will be remembered for my accolades. Given time, all records are surpassed, licenses expire, titles are revoked, all redeeming qualities will at some unfortunate turn be disqualified. After all, every spotlight turns to scrutiny, and there's no insurance for this singular vocational hazard. I regret to inform you, I'm a poet. My foot is already firmly lodged in my mouth. Watch me chew and stew and languish over skewed and mangled language. Each hop, step, foot slip of this tongue could be my last. Any utterance, my undoing, and like Saul, I'll fall on my own sword, my word. I have no delusions of fame. All applause must eventually die down. I will not be remembered for my words, but neither do I wish to be. Surely a man should not be measured by his ability to scribble or to spit. You wouldn't measure a tree by its ability to wax, but by its fruit you shall know them. Did I act justly? Did I love mercy? Was I gracious in victory and defeat? Was I kind in my affections? Did I walk humbly, or was I at least tenacious in my trying? If I'm to be recalled in any fond or lasting way in you, may it be for more than just noble words and noble intentions, please. Will you grant me the gift of your partial forgetfulness? May the faults, faux pas, and failures fade, be swept away like chaff to the haze until only the good grain remains. And then one day, in the garden of your memory, when the twilight graces your grey matter to turn everything golden, in that light you may see me as all I ever hoped to be, and that which I truly am, a clumsy, outstretched heart. And maybe then you will remember that there was a moment when you reached back. Thank you.
Hooray! They are going crazy.
Both clicks are clicking.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. I found that so touching and such an interesting contrast to what some people think of as the cliche of slam poetry, which can be like, what I am saying right now is the most important thing and the thing that absolutely defines me and that I will be remembered for my words.
I will mark my spot into the clay. Absolutely. I will plant this flag and I will be remembered for it. And let's carve it all out in stone. I wrote this piece after going and competing internationally. And I found that when I was over there was a lot of, so in the American NPS slam, there was, Trump had been in power for a year. It was 2017. Everyone had sharpened their words to a fine flint. And there was some incredible poetry in there. But man, everyone was hanging so much on their words. And I recognized that I didn't want my time on stage and the things that I offer on there to be the be-all and end-all of who I am. I think that particular trip was very eye-opening for me and my experience of what is my relationship to my art, what's my relationship to my audience, and what is the offering that I do want to make. Yeah. So that's where this came from.
Do you think words are kind of easy in a way when compared to something like actions or character, that kind of thing?
I think that words can get cheaper faster. Yeah. When I'm going and listening to the work that young people are sharing inside of schools, you will find that there is often a reference to what is the red hot button topic that's currently being used. Here is the rhetoric that's currently, or the hashtag that's being thrown around. And so that will be worked into a piece. And I'm like, you reached for it because it was a recognizable flavor. That's great. But if you had to write it your own way, or if you had to point to it differently, would you still be able to do that? I have found for my work, it's not that I need to reinvent a wheel every single time, but I don't want what I offer to be tokenistic. And it should be backed up with action. I believe that too. Yeah.
Do you think maybe when we're making art, we all start off in that place where maybe it's very obvious like who or what our influences are? I think of all the times, late primary school, for example, where I was going to dress up nights or parties or whatever as like Neo from The Matrix. Yes. I hadn't seen The Matrix, but the iconic image of Neo was just in my head, like it just stuck there for whatever reason. It lit up that part of the brain that was like, oh, this is cool. Or doing a drama class in school, and the stuff I would write for that was extremely derivative. It's like you put The Twilight Zone and David Fincher in a blender, and that's what it was. So maybe it just takes a bit of time. You mentioned these young people, whatever. Maybe it just takes a bit of time to, I don't know, you're trying on, it's almost like trying on different clothes, like going, this is ill-fitting or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. All we can hope for is a heartfelt plagiarism in terms of the words are already there.
Yeah.
The language already exists. But I do think that there is a difference in between a person saying, I am doing this because I want to be the next person. I would like to be the next Shane Gazan, as an example, or Sean Williams, because I know that he was mentioned recently. But yeah, versus I am aspiring to this level. And so I am reaching for the thing that may be a little bit higher shelf than what I'm currently able to reach. But hopefully with time and with development, with growth, people do find, you know what, I've learned how to play in 7/4. Now I'm settling back into 3/4 because that's more me. Yeah.
Into the swing of things, right?
Yes. Yes, or the waltz if you prefer, but yes.
Oh, yes, it is waltz. Oh, sorry. The pun was right there. You served it up to me so well, John, and I cocked it up. I'm so sorry.
There is absolutely, I'm sure that there is swing in 3/4. It's great.
This guy don't dance. This guy here. Heartfelt plagiarism. I think my face lit up at that, John, because I was like, oh, what a great band name or episode name, but also... yeah, all that stuff I was doing and the stuff I continue to do, a lot of it is heartfelt plagiarism. I'm not going around saying that I'm some original whatever. I think just keeping it real.
Yeah.
Now, John, you are very much already, even though you haven't been on this show before, you're already kind of part of the lore, L-O-R-E.
Yes.
Because I've somewhat stolen from you, John, and I just want to know if I owe you any royalties for this.
I will let you know when you go triple platinum. Like, just send us a framed CD or a microphone stand.
You can come backstage. I don't know if there is a stage to come back to. What I'm referring to, of course, is you were name dropped in episode 2 with Jude Chrisan, who I finally said his surname right. So there you go. That's one for you, Jude. You were name dropped in terms of you gave this lovely visual metaphor about going to a spoken word night and everyone's trying to bring like the turkey, the big idea.
Yes.
But you were talking about bringing your own flavor or your own style of dish. So again, thank you for letting us crib that and use that throughout.
You're welcome.
Can you go a little bit deeper into that metaphor? Where did that kind of originate for you? Did it happen by in the moment when you were in that conversation with our friend Jude?
So no, it's a metaphor and it's a visual that I have presented a few times when I've run workshops around poetry. So the where it would have started in 2014 and 2015 was when I first started getting into competition slam. And so I went along to Slam-A-Lama Ding Dong, met the crowd there at Bella Union way back in the day, climb 1,000 steps, and there you were. It was wonderful. What happened in that space was that across the year in a regular month, you could have one person do a piece about deep trauma and needing to overcome adversity. And the very next piece could be a person talking about their love-hate relationship with their tractor because they're a farm boy. And there was this wonderful melting pot of, we don't know what the next person or the person before was going to bring. So we're offering the thing that we've offered. And yet, come the finals, at the finals, everyone brought their dark nugget and the thing that they had been preparing for a really long time. And so that was the thing that was filmed, that was the thing that was circulated, and that was the thing that was broadcast out. So when young people or when open micers and people that are just discovering the form said about YouTubing button poetry or what have you, they're finding these pieces that are really meaty and dense. And so I noticed that and I went, I don't want to feel like, oh man, I must mention that the sea levels are rising and this is the problem with society and everything must be jammed into 3 minutes and look at all the process and care. And that's, to me, that's bringing the turkey.
Yeah.
If 10 people do that in a night and they've all brought their big, heavy, dense thing, then at the end of a night, people will feel like they've been, I wouldn't say overfed, but I would say that they've been served up a lot of really heavy things.
Yeah.
The thing that set me apart within the Melbourne spoken word scene, at least in the early days, was I decided what my flavor was going to be. I tell people I try and center my work around hope, identity, and wonder. If I can lean into those things or be something adjacent to that, then that's my flavor. And that will be heavy at light. But in the earlier days, and particularly now, I noticed that people who are thinking I need to make the heaviest thing will be the most impactful thing. But that's not how food works.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I've gotten through and I've been given at least a nice little bit of reputation out there because I've brought frog in a pond or fairy bread. And people are like, wow, I didn't realize that I missed this flavor, but I've missed it.
Yeah.
And thank you, you know? Yeah. And so and I mean, there'll always be time for turkey, but I don't need to bring that into a 3-minute piece on an open mic or in a competition space every single time. I have the full pantry of the human experience to draw on. So that's what that's about.
The whole pantry, yeah. And what's cool about this, John, is that we've essentially inverted the episode, which I like. We've talked about the turkey stuff first, which is I'm totally down for. You are the author of it, so you know.
And now you know.
Yes, he's calling the shots, everyone. Yeah, because the spectrum of human experience and emotion and expression is so wide.
Yeah.
Like I am goofy and playful, but not always. I can spit fire about something that I'm passionate about, but not all the time. I can be super serious, but not all the time. So taking that approach of, first off, you chose some really great keywords or themes there. You had hope, wonder, and
identity.
Love it. Very, very year 12 English of us. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I like how you can play around so much with those three. That's not pigeonholing yourself at all, I don't think.
No.
Hope often comes from very heavy experiences, I imagine, kind of thing. Identity,
light at the end of the tunnel kind of stuff.
The contrast, the yin and yang, whatever you like. So I appreciate that the metaphor comes from something that you've obviously done the work on yourself in terms of finding your place and your flavor, because you're right. I certainly think there are definitely people out there, maybe people who are listening now, that would find slam poetry, being involved or watching, like more attractive if they knew that there was a wider range of stories being told, for example, that it wasn't just all one color or one flavor.
Yes, absolutely. Often artists are speaking to the pulse of the city and they are saying, this is what I'm perceiving, this is what I'm experiencing. My work is a reflection back of what this experience is. And so when you have a society that is feeling silenced, then you can expect that the art will be louder or in bold font.
Sure.
You could anticipate that if a person was when a person is in young love, they will want to be reaching for the stars. And so it absolutely makes sense that there are directions that these things go in. I think that because, and I don't mean to be speaking on behalf of everyone, but because there is so much disillusionment and disenchantment at the moment with the way things are, there are many more people that are finding their way to poetry because I demand to be heard. And I absolutely respect and admire all of the artists that take the time to get on stage and share their story and their truth and their heart. It is my hope that I can, for myself anyway, keep my audience safe while it is that I am sharing, and that, like you said, that I have done the work before I come to the stage. Yeah.
What do you think keeping an audience safe means?
So I'm going to borrow from another artist, Fung, Waffle Iron Girl.
Oh, yes.
We had a very rich conversation once where we talked about processed and unprocessed poetry. And processed poetry would suggest I'm holding a piranha inside of a fish tank and I'm holding this in my hands. The piranha is dangerous, but I am holding it safely so that you can observe this difficult, teethy thing. And that is processed poetry, because I will do this work. I will keep the lid on the emotion that is being felt. I'm giving people the opportunity to look in and see the truth of this thing, but I'm not splashing it on them. There are some people that when they show up on the microphone, and I say this with love to all artists, but there are some poets that will get up on stage and the problem is you, my audience. The problem is you, category.
Yeah.
And that, or is basically using the stage as effectively the only place in which they might do something that's therapeutic for themselves. And therefore you have gone from offering something to an audience to putting it in their lap and obliging them to hold you. With my work, I do not wish for people to feel like they need to hold me after I've shared it.
Wow. Yeah, that's good, because that's a big, I'm going to use the language of like a big transfer of power when you go there, in terms of, yeah, if you're sharing something that's unprocessed or whatever, and like you said, the feel of almost needing to be held by the audience, that's a lot of responsibility.
And there will always be time, and like, again, the spectrum of human experience. There are times when all I can do is offer something in tears or offer something shy or shaking.
Absolutely.
And that is important, that if that's going to be shared, that it's shared in a way that's, you would hope that there is enough goodwill in the community that can happen.
Yeah.
I think that if I was thinking, great, I'm going to go along to this gig and get my fix and I'll finally get this off my chest, then I will often pocket a piece like that until I feel like I have done the emotional work with it.
Yep.
So that I am not a crumbled mess at the end of it. But who knows, these things, But that's, suffice to say, that's the sort of decision that I make for myself in my practice.
Yeah, I like that. At the moment, I got a bit of inspiration the other day and started on a piece and got halfway through and I was like, oh, I need to know a little bit more about my subject matter here. I think I was really reaching and it wasn't coming across like how I wanted it to. Yeah. So maybe that's my version of thinking I need to get a little bit more info. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere, do you know what I mean? And it's okay to try things and whatever.
Of course.
But yeah, I do relate a little bit to that feeling of wanting to look after people and I don't know, leave people thinking at the very least, not necessarily feeling wounded by what's going on. Now, along with the turkey metaphor, you've become the undisputed king of, I guess, food-based metaphors on socials recently. You were sharing a little clip you made about, I believe you were talking about people who come up to you or who say to you, oh, I don't know how you do what you do in terms of sharing your work. And you had some really interesting wisdom around that. Could you share that here?
Certainly. So often there are people who at the end of a set will come up and say, I love this thing. I've always wanted to do this, but I don't think I can. Wouldn't know where to start. Wouldn't know how to move from that process of feeding myself to feeding someone else. And I ask people, how do you like your eggs? And so because, and apologies to my friends who are vegan, when a person makes eggs first time round, they probably make an absolute mess of it. You burn it, or it's not didn't flip it right, you broke the yolk, whatever it is. You start off messy, but eventually you find your rhythm with the equipment that you're using. With making an egg in the morning, you put on some tunes, you start adding all these different elements to it, and then one day you end up with the perfect eggs. And so I tell people that when a person realizes I have made a good thing, there is this, I would say, this sort of three-laned highway. One direction is to go pure ego and to say, I am going to open a restaurant. People are going to come from miles around. I'm going to go platinum. I'm going to be a millionaire because I can make the perfect eggs. And then there are other people who are like, I made these perfect eggs, but so what? I am not Jamie Oliver. I'm not Gordon Ramsay. Why would anyone want to have this good thing? This was a dumb idea. This thing is rubbish. I am rubbish. I'm never gonna share my thing. And so one direction is ego, the other direction is fear and shame. But somewhere in the middle is love and growth. Somewhere in the middle, I say, I love this so much, I'm going to make breakfast in bed for someone that I love. I love this so much, I'm going to do a backyard barbecue or a front yard, invite the neighbors over, or a pop-up store. And so you start building experience. You start learning more than one way to do eggs. You start increasing your qualification to offer this thing. And then eventually, maybe one day, you might be an award-winning chef. But the way in which you don't space jump to it. We don't go, great, I've done this right once. I am forevermore going to do this perfectly. I don't want anyone to look at whoever it is that they consider the pinnacle of artistry or the pinnacle of industry and talk themselves out of it before they've even started. It's really important that people give themselves that journey of, great, I don't have 1 million likes on Facebook or 1,000, 100, whatever, clicks and scores and accolades. I'm not going to be remembered for that. It is going to be that at some point I loved something, I fed someone and they were blessed by it. Let me find those people that have blessed me and make an offering to them. My art is an offering. And to that point of sharing it and putting it on stage, I mean, I tell people, to continue the metaphor, I have a lot of fun in the kitchen. I make a lot of mistakes in there and I play. And when I finally think, hey, this is presentable, I've enjoyed it, I've finessed it, now I can offer it to an audience. When the waiter places the plate on the table, it is no longer the restaurant's meal. It is now the person who is eating it. It's their meal. When people ask me, how is it that you're confident? I'm like, when I am on stage, I am only putting a plate in front of my audience. I can do that with as much flourish or care or simplicity as I wish, but it's up to them to decide that it's their favorite meal or it's not. And so their response to it is actually entirely out of my hands. All I had to do was diligently, faithfully make this good thing good and then share it. And then the rest is up to them.
And you're full in a way. Like you've eaten it and you're full. You're not up there starving and needing them to give you the morsels that they don't like or whatever. I know I'm stretching the metaphor.
No, but this is the thing. When you go along to I love the poets that go and hide in their corner until they're ready to get on the microphone. But if I go along to a competition slam, I want to hear everything. I want to be fed too.
Yeah.
And the intention that I set for myself is, particularly in that sort of space, I am going to feast. I am going to celebrate and be with family. And for that reason, I'm not going to be scared.
Yeah.
Tabani brought no strings for the APS slam. That's on YouTube. It is marvelous. I couldn't perform what he performs. You guys are talking about not remembering the APS. I remember it because I was in the audience that year and it was a marvelous long night.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have time to compare to 30 other poets that are going to be up in a space like that. Why should I? Because their experience is not my experience. Their flavor is not my flavor. So why pressure that? Just love the dish that you have made and then get out of your own way. And then enjoy what other people have shared.
Yeah.
Because that way you go home feeling fed too. That's my approach to it anyway.
Good. It's what we've been talking about all along, which is the dinner party. Every night is a dinner party.
Absolutely.
There's that exchange. And when you talk about feeding people, that feeds so well into what you were saying about like care and safety for the audience. So I think that's really good. We'll jumble it up a bit. So you said that you were putting yourself together on the scene, 10 years ago or so? I know that you've been a feature at many places. You've been around. You've been a journeyman in this space. But how did you get started in slam?
So I got started in slam. I photographed the book launch, These Wandering Feet by Joel McKerrow.
Joel, please come on.
Hello, Joel. We appreciate the awesomeness that you are doing, but get over here. So his thank you to me for photographing his gig was to invite me to one of his workshops, which was, I think, a weekend or so later. And at the end of it, they said, hey, Joel said, would you like anyone who wants to come along and see a slam, there's one on tonight or tomorrow night. And so I went to Slam-A-Lama Ding Dong in 2013. I'd been writing before that, but I'd never seen poetry done on the stage quite like there. And so it was a really wonderful mixed bag environment, and people were coming from all areas. There were some folks that had driven in from the countryside and people that were there every single month religiously. Wonderful blend of people in that room. And I realized I grew up in music theatre. I've been on stage since I was 16. I've been making a fool of myself for a long enough time that I don't get the same sort of jitters that maybe people who have never been in front of a crowd has before. So I don't have that fear factor to juggle with. It's meant that I think, able to sit with a piece and sort of go, right, where might this make sense? What is it that I would like to be able to share about it? And when does it feel true? Yeah. So I've competed, I've been along to open mics. Like you said, if you wanted to, there's something every day of the week in Melbourne.
There really is, yeah.
And that's beautiful. But yeah, I think that there are certain rooms where I feel like, okay, I'm sharing with people who are finding their voice and finding their words. And then there are other rooms where I'm just with family and I can bring something that's half-baked and we'll see how it sits.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there are beautiful rooms like that. Michael Reynolds' Passionate Tongues and Poetic Express, that for me is a space that's always felt like I'm sitting down with family and we're bringing something straight out of the kitchen, but we're working with other chefs here. It's wonderful.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
You're still, some of those spaces, you're still in the process of breaking eggs until you get the omelette, and that's
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't know, what's been some highlights over that time? Because I'm trying to think if I've had anyone on yet who's maybe been doing it for as long as you have.
So one of the things that, because my work is not as politically charged as other people's work, my work isn't pointing at the establishment and saying, let's charge the castle. I've used that as a visual, but it's not. I tell people I'm making a garden, I'm not storming the fortress.
Beautiful.
And what that has meant is that if a convener has had themselves some really radical, dynamic, heavy, whatever it is, I am the palate cleanser before lunch. That is how the TEDx St Kilda group described me. So when we talk about highlights, TEDx St Kilda had 3 years that they ran, and it's all voluntary when it's TEDx and no one's making money in these things, but they picked the theme of when dark meets light. And I wrote to them and said, oh, that's about hope. Would you like a poem about hope? And they said, yes, actually, we would love a palate cleanser before lunch.
Oh, wow.
I love them. I love those organizers that were wonderful. They didn't know what they were saying, but my goodness, it's like church is like, we would love a skit. It's like, please, no, it's more, it's actually art. Anyway, so that was but the reality is that it's not just about the way in which I perform, it's also about my tone and presence in front of an audience. And so when people haven't had a crowd before, or if they're dealing with an audience that is entirely unfamiliar, I have been the opening feature for at least 3 or 4 events across a decade where it is to a crowd that has perhaps never been along to an open mic before, perhaps never seen a feature set, or perhaps never participated in spoken word poetry before. And so in that respect, my work doesn't have big dictionary word descriptions. It's using fairly common language. It's something where a person could say, I was expecting Shakespeare and I got something like that, but it wasn't. I could actually get my head around it and leave the people who do the high ballet and high opera for another month. But yeah, that's where I sit in the spectrum of things. Yeah. And that opens some amazing doors, I think.
Yeah. And sometimes it sounds like that was the most appropriate approach for the opportunity for TEDx, for example. Again, people who've never heard something like that, to do something that's accessible, that has really solid foundations, that has maybe some whimsy or whatever. I think it's funny how we can sometimes rank, like why do we think that drama is better than comedy, for example? Do you know what I mean? Trying to rank different attributes of a piece of work, whether it be film or spoken word or whatever. It's all a part of the palette and a part of the spectrum, as we've been talking about.
Yeah. Side note, but Hollywood loves their biopics. The vast majority for the last 20 years of actors that have won the Academy, the main Academy, has been because they have played the role of someone and they've become this, that they have embodied this thing. Whereas comedians, stunt workers, there are these other categories that are just given, you've got your 30 seconds, now get off the stage kind of thing that happens. And that is a valid part of creativity and it should be given a similar honor. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, you've been doing it for so long now that you kind of, you know the sandpit that you're playing around in, if you like.
Yes.
And there's, so many options within those 3 or 4 themes that you've picked out. It's not, it doesn't really limit you. It actually gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of play, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of play, let's move on to piece number 2, shall we?
Excellent. So this is a piece called Cutting the Cake. She is blowing out the candles of her cake. A friend of a friend elbows me to stand closer for tradition. I laugh it off, gesturing to the camera, indicating I have a job to do. He elbows me again. She will want someone to kiss after she cuts the cake. But this is a woman surrounded by her loves, and I do not wish to be that presumptuous. She kisses her old housemate instead. Crisis averted. But years on, and I still wonder at times about times like this. What if I? What if she? What if we? I suppose that this is why nerds like multiverse theory, where in some other dimension, every blunder, every missed opportunity exists with its opposite twin outcome. In some other version of this moment, I step forward and she smiles, and the whole story changes.
Very nice. Plenty of multiverse theory out there at the moment, especially in pop culture.
Yes.
I want to ask you about that, not if you think multiverse is real or not, but I've always found it a weird kind of, when it's used in fiction, I've always found it a little bit interesting in that it almost makes everything kind of inconsequential in a way. I'm trying to say that I find it a little bit boring, but I don't know if that's everyone's experience. I know some people really like that in their stories or whatever, for example.
I love the prospect of what if, and that's what this middle of this piece was about. I think that I was raised with the idea that all art is holding some sort of worldview. And if a person's worldview is it's all just a game, then there will be this comedy, but it will be a surface thing, and it will sometimes turn nasty, and it will. But those things play out. If a person within multiverse theory, like you're saying, says, I am going to make the absolute most of this because I cannot reach across the divide, and if there are other universes, they have no consequence to this sandpit. The more recent exploration has been, what if another version of me jumps from that sandpit into this one? That creates a super interesting range of what ifs, but also, am I still the hero then? And who should be rooting for me? And why does it matter which choice I make? Because, and so, yeah, Marvel Universe, DC Universe, they're all having those, they're asking those sorts of questions. I don't think it necessarily relates enough to my everyday experience because I am still an adult that needs to take responsibility for my own actions.
Yeah.
And as novel as that sort of fantasy space might be, at the end of the day, I like stories where I might learn something to take with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoy some of that, but only to a certain extent.
Yeah, and maybe in refining my argument, if you like, I think maybe the Marvel and DC of it all is obviously very commercialized. And so when you tell these stories, on a surface level, it might be about exploration of identity, but really it's just about, we wanted to bring back all these characters that you love. And so
tap into nostalgia.
Yeah. Whereas a lot of people hold up Everything Everywhere All at Once as a more character-focused exploration of multiverse theory, if you like, because it's talking about one or two very simple central relationships and how that plays out across contexts. And I'm sure there's people listening that are big fans of that film. And I think a lot of it is because it has that beating heart. It's not trying to sell you action figures of Michelle Yeoh in various outfits.
Michelle, we would love you on this show as well.
Now that'd be something. She's having a moment, isn't she?
Absolutely. Sorry, carry on.
As soon as you said multiverse, I was like, I think that's what I'm more getting at. I've tired of the commercialization of it. I think it's a cool thing to explore as a character study thing, but if it's just being done to I don't know, get bums and seats at the multiplex, I think it's had its time maybe.
And to that point, I mean, in 2017 when we went over so I was on the first team to go across to the NPS Slam in the States. Denver, very exciting. I scored low sevens because I am a white, straight Christian male. And again, Trump had been in power for a year. And the main topics of conversation, I kid you not, were Black Lives Matter, gun violence, the transgender narrative, and gentrification, all of which are super important topics, but none of which I can speak to.
Yeah.
And we had an audience that was voting and scoring based on the popular view and were scoring based on the identity politic that was being presented and that they felt obliged to acknowledge. If I was to go in and perform a piece about the woes of growing up in eastern Melbourne, A, it wouldn't be understood, B, they wouldn't click to it. But if I leaned really hard into mental health and bullying in school and if I leaned on the sore points that were already existing, then I would evoke some sort of response. But there are times to do that sort of lean, but I tell people I want to be able to point to the mountain of sorrows without climbing the mountain of sorrows. And so for the work that I do nowadays, if I am going to go into those difficult places, I'm not going to tell a person, I went there, score me a 10.
I know the etiquette of these things sometimes is that you wouldn't score anyone necessarily lower than a low 7 because I think that's frowned upon. Is that kind of your understanding?
Yeah, generally speaking, judges will be told at the beginning of a slam, you are scoring for the piece itself and the way it was delivered.
Yeah. You're
not factoring in whether a person was holding a phone or an iPad to read their piece, but you are judging, did it move you?
Yeah.
Did you go somewhere unexpected? Was the alliteration clever? How much did you feel your heart was moved? And I don't want to be a person that moved their heart because I railroaded them.
Yeah.
There's time and place for railroading. But yeah, I think that if a person is going into a slam space, and this is just me as somebody who doesn't compete so much anymore, if a person is going in saying, I will kick them in the feels so hard that they have to say ouch, then yeah, maybe I am not thinking about audience safety or honor anymore. I would like to achieve a similar movement, but without people feeling like they were bruised because they encountered me.
The mountain, like you said, it's there, you know,
Yeah.
but are we at base camp or are we just pointing to it like it's Mount Doom or something?
Yeah. And when I've taught public speaking, I'll tell people it's like, you can yell something from the outcropping saying, come follow, pioneers, come and journey. Or I can say, I have gone on this road, I have gotten the scars, but here are the flowers. This is what I found for you. And that can be offered as a gift without necessarily dragging someone along, without obliging them to experience every cut and graze that you have had on your path.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, yeah.
And it's come up a few times when you relayed this experience just now. It doesn't sound like you're saying, oh, look, it is what it is. People related to what they relate to. You're not necessarily bitter about the fact that you went in.
Oh, of course I'm bitter, Andrew. I want multiple accolades. Damn it. No, I think that there have been times we talk about score creep. The first person in the first round.
Oh, the worst. You don't want it.
You don't want it.
If you want to win, you don't want it.
For myself, when I've gone along to Slammer, for example, I have never gone along wishing to win. I have only wanted to go along. This is about as competitive as I get. I have only wanted to go along to score well enough to perform the next piece that I had.
I like that.
That's about as much lean as I bring. If I've been outscored because this person brought this brilliant, magnificent thing that we've never heard before, good for them. I am pleased. But if I get outscored because somebody decided that they were going to press the red hot button topic that's been trending on the socials for the last month, then I'm not as convinced that the judges did their job. Hopefully, though, people find me an interval and talk to me and say what resonated with them. And if I'm absolutely wrong, then so be it. I'll go and polish my work a bit more because it wasn't the perfect eggs.
These American competitions, do they also pick judges at random, essentially?
Yeah, so the randomized context, the idea for that as it was done in the States was we endeavored to do a spread of gender and nationality. Typically, faith or worldview is not factored in. You imagine that most people are inside of these spaces are probably holding a fairly liberal or still emerging kind of view of things, and that's fair. The only other insistence is you haven't dated or are not directly related to somebody who is competing in the slam. And so the last thing that you want is your current partner or your ex-partner holding a scorecard, because there's past history there. Ultimately, in the ideal, you're getting a spread of people that are coming to it with fresh ears. And also no preconceived idea of who it is that's performing in front of them. So that way the art can be the thing that's speaking for itself. That's in the perfect world. It doesn't always go that way.
Yeah, of course. And I think what we're saying is that maybe there is such thing as Oscar bait in slam. And that's okay, because Oscar bait wins Oscars. And some people are really good at producing Oscar bait. And if that's what's within you, then absolutely go for it.
Yeah.
I guess it does become, everyone's got a bias. And so I understand we're talking about the competition side of slam so much here. We're hitting the button because it is so much more than that.
Yes.
But when we come there, like we know it's imperfect. I've been to a comp where they couldn't find enough judges in the audience. And so they had to just make do with 3 instead of 5. And that changes things up as well.
Absolutely.
So it's far from an exact science. And in some ways, I wouldn't have it any other way, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I endeavor to encourage people as much as possible. Like, go along and support your friends in the scene. But the best nights are the ones, in my opinion. Yes, you can go and support your friend in their art, or you can go along going, I am curious about this.
Yeah.
And curiosity is a really it should be something that is leaned into and supported. When people hear about fringe shows, as an example, I know this person, I know that they're marvelous and funny, they're doing a thing that they've never done before, I can put money behind that because I love them.
Absolutely.
Or the write-up of this was so bizarre and so fascinating that I'm just going to spend the money and I'm going to go along, and if it's a terrible night, then at least I can say I tried something new.
Yeah. I've always talked about trying to support people who are trying things or have some work out there in the same way that we would support whatever dozen mega artists that we have some kind of parasocial relationship to.
Yes.
We would get all their
The
stuff.
Tay-Tays of the world, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I have 2 ears and a heart. Tay-Tay's great, but I don't know Tay-Tay.
Tay-Tay, if you're listening, we would love to have you on the show.
Stop it. I have a parasocial relationship with Tay-Tay like all of us, but I don't know her. And that doesn't mean I should stop buying her stuff either. But I do know people, many people, who are at the grassroots level doing stuff. And I would just encourage anyone listening to support, to subscribe, to buy tickets, to buy work,
Talk up the gig that you've gone along to, and if a person is doing a season of a thing, go to one of the opening or second nights so that there is still time for people to get behind it.
Ooh, that's a good tip.
Because word of mouth does masses, and you might think, I'll go to the show at the finale and that way it'll have all its polish and find its way. But if you can go along in those first couple of sessions, that will often dictate the run of a season. And telling people, I saw this, it was magnificent, you got to get along. And this is why. Don't just say, this was amazing. Give people a hint of what was the flavor that you got.
Yeah.
That is the best kind of review. The last thing that you want to do is be the blurb that says, this is the best book I've ever written or ever read. Because that says nothing.
Yeah.
Tell people what was the flavor that you took from that night. And if you can do that, people will say, I missed that flavor. I would like that flavor. I'm going to go. For the audience that are giving commendations, tell people the flavor. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that. So
food metaphors for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. So competition, elements of competition aside, let's dive into creativity in general, the fun and the joy of it. So I don't know, what's your take on how do you go about developing ideas and putting something on the page? Doing something in the kitchen, so to speak.
The most literal answer to that would be hunger first. I have experienced a thing, it's stirring in me. I need to get it out somehow.
Yeah.
So there will be some pieces that are born out of the itch that must be scratched. There are some pieces that are, for myself, that are recounting moments and memories. And so they are held quite lightly. The cutting the cake piece is me recounting a memory with names redacted and details removed. But it is me saying, that is something that was enough, for me to go, I'm going to give that the time it deserves and put words and thoughts and heart to it. I have found some of my favorite pieces have just been inadvertent observation of life. As an example, I am walking through Doncaster Shopping Centre, and I say this in my workshops. I'm walking through Doncaster Shopping Centre, minding my own business, and coming from one direction is Spider-Man running, like child Spider-Man is running in one direction, and coming from the other direction is Batman on a scooter.
Speaking of multiverses. And so they run up to each other, they pause, they look each other up and down, and then they continue on their way. And my inner nerd is going nuts because I've just watched a Marvel DC live in real life crossover. It can be done.
No one else saw it, but I saw it and they saw it. And so that exists in my mind of, I've got to have my eyes open. I've got to have my ears out. I will overhear conversations. I will see these moments that make you sit up and go, And so those will be the things that end up in a journal or put down on a page somewhere and pocket it away. And then that will become the detail that is part of the libretto, the story, the poem, the something, because that was real life. It is not me making up an entire fantasy world. It's me recounting details that are already there and already exist. And so it's received authentically. because it really happened. Batman was on a scooter. The bat scooter, that's right. So yeah, I don't need to embellish, and it doesn't feel false because it really happened. And so that'll be part of the creative process, will be me just pocketing things away and then letting them emerge as they need to. And so for me, that's about wonder. That's about saying, life, what do you have for me today? Let's go. I want to participate in this, but I also want to be a recipient of it. So yeah, is that answering your question? I'm not sure if
I like
if we
it.
wandered.
People ask me that sometimes, and I think Kiara asked me that last episode, and I said, "Look, I'm not looking for an answer. I'm just looking for your answer." Do you know what I mean? And the way that you linked it through to one of your core pillars, if you like, of your work was really cool. So that was hope for you. That was kind
about
of
wonder.
For you. What has come across in your experience, which is tapping into the other pillars, which were identity and hope, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So I'll throw back and say that poetry for me did not start on stage. It started in high school because I was bullied, which is a common enough story. But I think that the way that was informing my narrative is you have this narrative at school of too tall, too hairy, too Greek, too serious, too much, too little. And so there is this very low esteemed narrative that was offered as a thread from the words that other people declared over me. At home, I was raised in a faith background, and so mum and dad were saying Psalm 139, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are a work in progress and you're a good thing. And so trust that process. And so in between these two threads, I decided I didn't just want the world's words thrown over me. And as much as I love my parents, I didn't just want my parents' words thrown over me. I wanted to declare words for myself.
Oh, wow.
And so poetry was birthed out of me, out of, I would say, some sort of obligation to myself to say, I want to find my words. I would like to think that they are not just grandiose and narcissistic. But yeah, I think that words create worlds, and so it's always been super important to say whether this is something that is shared to an audience and done in slam space or whether it's just something that's put into the journal. It's important because those are mine. And so that I think has been why poetry has been such an important part of the journey, and for myself because it is shaped so much of my identity of saying, what are John's anchor points? What are John's flavors? I recognize I am this way. I'm not that way. When I've run these self-reflection workshops recently inside of an acute psych ward in Monash. And we were going in, and I said to the participants who were part of this workshop, I can't tell you how you like your coffee. You can tell me how you like your coffee. There is no right, wrong answer, but that is worth naming. It's worth celebrating. And the more that we can name those things about ourselves, the way in which I lean, the way in which I move and find my person, when the tough circumstantial stuff starts coming at you, I am hopefully less inclined to have a full existential crisis. It'll be a partial existential crisis. It'll be because even if I'm having the worst day, I'll still know how I like my coffee. So yeah, that identity formation and spending time with that and finding the things that feel certain or at least current about myself, I think everyone has to do that in their own way. And so I try and encourage that in people this is a really easy starting point for your writing, is to say, I start with the things that I know. And those things can be shared because my favorite season is autumn. Someone else's will be spring. It won't be a wrong answer. It's just my answer. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, I love that. And it comes back to the comment from the last two episodes of was that the answer you were looking for? It's the same thing. Like, I'm not necessarily looking for one kind of thing. No, thank you for taking us through that.
Yeah.
I'd love to maybe break a little bit of new ground on this show and see how we go with this next part of the conversation. I'm really interested in the interaction between, I'm going to use the words like art and creativity and faith, right? And my understanding of you, John, is that faith is an important part of your life, which is something that we share in common.
Yes.
So I don't know, did you have any reflections about that? I find it a fascinating place to play around in, but What did
Yeah.
you think?
Well, a few things come to mind. I would premise with, I endeavor to premise with the fact that I have grown up in a traditional Christian household.
Yeah.
In my space, mum and dad said to us, you are allowed to ask any question you want so long as it is sincere.
Oh, wow.
And if you reach a different place to us, so be it, but ask your questions and dig. It's not just eat your greens.
Yeah.
And so I've done a lot of reflection around the way I believe the value of myself, the value of others, and my place in this ecosystem of existence. I tell people that according to the biblical narrative, the first thing that comes out of man's mouth is poetry.
Huh.
When God forms Adam in the earth and he brings him up to life and he says, start naming the animals. There is no scripture saying, and Adam called the dog and the cat. There is nothing that's said at all. And it's only when it's a couple of verses later that it says, God saw that it was not good for man to be alone, put him to sleep, made Eve. And then when Adam sees Eve, he says, oh, at last, bones of my bones, flesh of my flesh. Exclamation, simile on simile. I am like you, you are like me, we are like each other.
Yeah.
And so words are a response to the stimulus of life. And it is something often that is birthed out of overflow of that joy, of that anger, sorrow, pain, all those things that we're experiencing. For myself, art has a few different factors, but it is predominantly about the thing that I observe and take in, the thing that stirs around inside of me, and in turn, the thing that is poured out in expression. So I wish to be audience and I wish to be artist. To the point of faith, I am encouraged by the fact that the first thing that I discover about God is that God is creative. And by my existence, I am a valid expression of the artist's imagination. I find some great consolation in that, in terms of, man, am I where I'm meant to be? Am I making enough? Am I doing enough? All of that spiral, I can at least settle a certain amount into it by going, oh, I'm in process. That's a good, I deserve a certain amount of grace for myself. God's not finished with me yet. And equally, if I'm going to give myself that respect and that dignity, then the natural overflow should be that I offer that dignity, that respect, that honor to everyone and anyone that I encounter, young, old, in alignment, not in alignment with me, like worldview, different subject matter, looks and appearances and all of that. They are equally a valid expression of the artist's imagination.
Yeah.
And that is, I should want to get out there and take in as much of the world as possible and experience it richly and offer something in a way that's going to not be poison. So in that respect, I feel responsible for my art, perhaps less so when it's in the kitchen, more when it's out in the restaurant. But if I'm going to offer something, I don't want it to be poison. I want to give something that is going to, where people can say, oh, I take this flavor from your work. I do feel this when we interact. And you aren't going out there going, I'm the bee's knees, look at me, I published a thing. I'm going in there going, look, I put something on I put a flavor on the table, but I loved your thing too. This is a rich exchange, and that's why people keep coming back to poetry. You don't, if you love the stuff, you're not going to do one night a year. You'll want to go and dip a toe in there and go along to this thing. I photographed Mother Tongue for 3 years. I've never performed at Mother Tongue because I don't identify as female. So has that room been for me? As an artist, no. But as an audience, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I am richer for that. And so this thing that we get to experience in life can be so rich. Am I going to say the only place that I am doing my spiritual expression inside an old concrete four-walled church on a Sunday, or am I constantly living this? I want to be living this constantly. I want to be in a place that is where I am able to intentionally listen, where I'm able to intentionally speak, where it's the first piece that I offered, where people might remember that I was a heart clumsily outstretched. And if I will put my feet wrong and I will have bad meal days. I'm not a finished work by any measure. But if you're going to journey with me, it's going to be fun. If you're going to journey with me, we will sample from the heartiness of the potatoes, and we will also grab the top shelf wine. Like, we're built for that relationship with each other. And so, yeah, faith as I understand it is me reconciling my relationship to myself, to my life, to the audience that I have around me on and off stage and in the world, and ultimately with the main artist. Yeah. So that's I suppose the summation of, and my art informs all of those interactions.
Oh, John, wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have so many reflections on that. That was so beautiful, mate. I thought that was so well articulated. Firstly, I just want to say, like, full credit to your parents, it sounds like, in terms of saying to you, ask your questions first off, sincerity.
Yeah.
If they're sincere questions. And also being totally open to the fact that you might end up at some place completely different to them. That's a big thing to say to a young person, a really respectful thing, I think, to say to a young person.
It is not a common thing in before we were a postmodern society, but to be able to say these, the passage is iron sharpens iron. Like, we benefit from a certain level of tension. It's not to crush and destroy each other. Wow. It is not to say, I want you to cookie cutter into the perfect citizen. When I've gone into schools, I've been into some of the private schools around Melbourne to perform, and I remember asking a particular librarian, where are these kids at? And they said, these kids have been raised to be very good citizens. They will go and volunteer in the soup kitchen, and they know how to debate well, and they can all do up a tie. But if any of them were to cut their hair short and dye it blue, they would be the subject of conversation for the next month. And so nobody cuts their hair short and dyes their hair blue. And I'm like, well, we've got to do something there. You know?
What was the tone like? Were they...
Very well behaved, very polite.
Okay.
And so when I go into a space like that, I am asking them, look, you might be incredibly academic and incredibly these things, but what's your language of imagination? What's the thing that makes you come alive? What are you doing for play? What are you doing for your own sense of joy and delight? Those are the questions that you guys should be exploring instead of, should I do maths or sciences? Like, that's because that's the stuff that you'll need to live with later on down the track, to the point of the way faith informs my art. I am not my art. My art is an offering. I've said a few times, as a photographer, I've needed to step away from that, saying, I can't live off this. I've got to go work in retail or customer service or NDIS work, which is what my current thing has been. And I need to earn my keep so that I can play with camera and writing and all these sorts of things. Every now and then, I will have this conversation with God where it's like, if you need to take the camera away from me, I'm placing it on the altar, please hand it back. And then I'll get called up to do a gig or two. And then I'm like, okay, you've handed it back in my lap. That's lovely. The last time that I did it, so parting with the camera the first time was like absolute terror and sadness. And I failed as a human and as an artist. The next time that I picked up the camera and placed it back on the altar, I was like, okay, I think that I'm recognizing that this is too taxing for me in this season. And then the last time that I placed it and handed it back, I just went, I'm exhausted. I don't want it to take it. And so I have, in comparison to some artists that feel like you must write every single day, you need to practice your scales 3 hours every morning, all of that, man, joy is a very important metric in my artistic creation, my artistic engagement. If it is not giving me joy, then I can't lean on it for validation. If I'm coming home from an open mic night and I feel like I've been walloped and I just feel beat down, then I have to do the things that are going to be caring for myself. And so care for self has absolutely been a lesson that I've learned and I've needed to apply to my art and to my engagement with the community.
That again, that thing of it's okay where you land, like being passed down, was really good. But as well, if you'll humour a bit of biblical humour, it was so good that you got the Psalm 139, the fearfully and wonderfully made, rather than, I don't know, the proverb about the heart is deceitful above all things, for example.
Yes, absolutely. There are, and I mean, in every, I imagine in every faith framework and even in social groups, you look at the Amish community, for example, no instruments. They don't do the electronic rock and roll. Oh man, but their quilting is so vibrant.
Yeah.
And so if it's not going to be one thing, it'll be another thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm very grateful to have been in a place where my parents allowed me to say, you're interested in sports for a bit? Give it a go for a couple of seasons, see what you think. You're interested in music? Let's start you with a piano or a guitar. It'll be slightly cheaper than a violin or a cello. So yeah, my mum and dad met in a choir. So the creativity has always been permitted. But for myself, it's always been important to say my art is my offering. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not on the stage, I am not eating up my soul. If I don't score a 10, I go back to the kitchen. I'm still happy because I served up. And that's the privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there were two other things as well. One was seeing yourself as creation or poem as well. Like, I really love that image of looking within ourselves, looking around ourselves and seeing everyone as poems, as books, as stories walking around. It's such a striking visual. And I often look at, you mentioned the biblical creation narrative, if you like. I see that more as poetry than, let's say, literal
history,
whatever.
science.
It's in a different genre. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of ancient scripture is in that kind of different genre. They're not writing or claiming things in the same way that we might. Along with that, you said that you use a visual of a heart clumsily outstretched.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
That's so good, because in saying that, you're not putting yourself in main character mode where you are expected or putting pressure on yourself to be the mouthpiece for anything, really. You know what I mean?
Look, I have every respect for the people who get given the opportunity to speak on behalf of their people, to speak on behalf of their subculture, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Like, there will certainly be times when a person says something that is not just from his perspective, it is for the everyman. If we get that opportunity in our lifetimes, what a blessing and a privilege. I should never think that is the pinnacle of my art, and I have to be on that podium in order for me to be impactful and effective. My impact might be the hand on a shoulder. I really enjoy this podcast, Andrew. And that might be the thing that keeps you going for another year before you see sponsorship. Who knows, But it might be the Rode microphones if you guys are listening. Who's to say that isn't the thing that has impact? And so in that respect, I don't believe the stage to be the last word on a matter. I don't believe the stage to be the ends. It is a step in an entire lifetime that I'm taking. And so I'm not just arting when I'm on stage. I don't think we make it as artists. I think we do it as artists. And that is that's my ethos. There will be times when because I asked a person's name when I was working in retail, they felt like they could come back to my shop.
Yeah.
Because I acknowledged someone's personhood, they had themselves a better day. That's the impact that I want. It might not be to the millions, it'll be to the ones and twos. And somewhere later on down the track, again, twilight graces the grey matter and turns everything golden. They might say, who was that guy, John? What was it about that? There was something in his flavour that was different. And And how do I find that for myself? That's what I hope my mark is.
Yeah. And I think there's probably two main reasons why, I'm kind of fascinated by this interaction between faith and creativity. I think one is that, my kind of background, I grew up as a church kid in a church community, and I loved it. I loved being a church kid. And I guess my proviso is I'm aware that not everyone who's had that experience does. And people have horrific experiences in these communities sometimes.
Yeah.
But mine was really good. And I grew up in a community that put a lot of emphasis on the creative arts, and the creative arts as important and a key part of the conversation of the big questions of life and opening the heart to wonder and identity and hope in some of the themes we've touched on. And so I've taken that with me throughout my whole life. And so when I'm doing stuff, when I'm seeing other people do creative things, I think it's like the most important thing in the world in a way. And allowing myself to tell stories or be vulnerable on stage and see other people do the same thing, it's such a privilege. And I've loved how Slam has made that come alive. And I've loved just hearing stories from people that I would have been judgmental of years ago or whatever, and having it really open my eyes to seeing these beautiful, creation poems walking around the world has been amazing. And I think maybe the other part is just I'm trying to work out, I just have such a strong fear, I suppose, of being misunderstood. And some of the stuff that I write about, I guess I'm wondering how it is being received or will be received by people who might have preconceptions about who I am. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Duke Ellington, jazz musician, said, I'm going to fudge it, but it was the privilege is being able to offer it. The blessing is if it's understood and received. The two are not guaranteed.
Oh, yeah.
It is not promised that I will have a stage and a microphone, and it is not promised that my audience will be favorable in its response. There are times when it's wonderful when I'm around familiar faces and I know that I can goof off, and all of those offerings have a little bit more improv and playfulness to it. And then there are other times where it's like, oh man, I am being asked to share a poem at a funeral or a heavy weighted day, and the gravitas of that is I feel more responsible to the assignment of what is being served up than I do towards let's make this Johnish. And so there are those considerations to take in the same way that a chef decides what quantity and what strength of flavor. Am I doing this for a white palate or not? Like when it comes around to stepping forward and offering things in good faith, I used to host a gig with Eva Lofnan called Faith Speaks, where we invited creative artists to share. Their only prompt was bring your blessing. That was the only prompt they were given. So there was no curation, no requests. When we did our interfaith gathering, we had Farah Biaini and Abdul Hamud, who used to run the Dirty 30. And we said to them, 20 minutes, share what you will. We trust you because we know that you're good faith actors.
Yeah.
And Abdul, beautifully, he said, I am rarely one to speak about my faith in poetry, and I have never been invited into a church before. But he decided that the blessing offering that he was to do was to sing through the portion of scripture in the Quran where Mary presents Jesus at the temple.
Wow.
And I've never heard that before or after, but it was him as a Muslim poet singing to an interfaith audience because we stepped forward and we said, we are holding this space in good faith.
Yeah.
And we are inviting you to bring the thing that will enrich you in the expression and enrich us in the receiving. I think that where the pendulum currently is when it comes around to the vulnerability of how do we hold space for difference? How do we, is a person saying a thing that I disagree with an insult, or is it an attack? Or is it just something that is being held in good faith and being offered legitimately and sincerely? I tell people my rule for that is that no idea on the table is sacred. If I put a card on the table, tear it to pieces. You are welcome to. no idea on the table is sacred, but the person on the other side of the table is sacred.
Oh, wow. That's so important, isn't it?
And I think that when people recognize that due dignity and that equal respect and honor being offered to each other, then I can sit and I can share with and I can break bread with the person who is entirely different from me. And they might hear things from me that they cannot understand or cannot be in alignment with, but hopefully we are richer for the exchange.
Yeah.
And that's to the idea of care. If I've done work that might be received poorly, I need to sit with it longer. Now, it might still be received poorly. There's no 100% guarantee of safety of space. You cannot achieve it. You can set the best intention possible, but I can't guarantee your safety. That's up to you. And that's up to us, between us, to say, when John says something to me, is he saying it at me to take a swipe? Or is he saying it because that's part of the dance? Am I allowing myself to show up here in a way that, is that heart hurt a good heart hurt? Or is he trying to poison me? And I guarantee you most artists are not trying to poison you. Some are. But hopefully, I think that if we're recognizing that we're showing up into the marketplace of ideas with goodwill for each other, then we can dialogue and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully, people will not feel hurt. Hopefully, people will feel like they might have someone to stir with a bit.
And in my heart of hearts, I don't want to poison anyone.
No.
It's a do no harm. So maybe I'm just trying to reconcile that with the fact that, for example, I wrote a piece recently called Nape, which is, it's kind of flipping the tables moment in terms of it's a critique of what I'm going to call purity culture. We don't really have time to get into what I necessarily mean by that today. But yeah, just writing that and being like, oh, I've observed like a lot of hurt that I feel like I'm channeling into this from people that I care about. And so maybe this is more about just working on my relationship with anger and passion, because that's not necessarily where I write from all the time. I'm far more playful than that. But that kind of came out of me. And yeah, again, I think I'm not looking to poison anyone with that, but it is an idea. That's open for interpretation.
And that's why people do trigger warnings. They say, hey, this thing's got some spice to it. If you're up for some spice, let's go. I think that is an appropriate consideration to be doing for each other. But yeah, like I will often ask myself, like, if I've retired a piece and I bring it out of retirement, to be able to say, do I still find joy in this flavor? And if I do, then maybe other people will. If I don't, then maybe it needs to sit on the shelf a little longer. And so I will, I will make those sorts of decisions, sometimes moment to moment, sometimes mid-slam.
Keeping us on our toes.
But yeah, oh no. In the States, I was ready to do a piece about a high school crush, and moments before me, the group from the Puerto Rican Slam Boys, love them all, but they did a piece about white knighting, so it's like, you nice guys trying to get into everyone's. And so I had Annie Sola look at me and say, John, you cannot do the piece you were going to do. So yes, sometimes you go, wow, that was a flavor. I cannot follow that up with this next thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you got to have something else in your back pocket to bring.
Yeah, there is an element of reading the room, I guess. That was fantastic, John. I'm so glad we were able to go there and hear your thoughts on that. Yeah. What's next for you? What are you working on? What's going on?
So I think that the forever projects for me, I wrote these pieces around self-reflection, these self-reflection activities that I presented last year inside of a psych space. I would like to flesh out those things more and create an entire sort of curriculum across like a multi-week something. The Forever book is a book called Reclaiming Beauty, which is me taking those concepts of artist and artwork and audience and really helping people approach beauty with a worldview of grace towards themselves and what's being done. I think that beauty as it currently exists is held as this sort of pinnacle, high fashion, all the influences sort of thing, and it's been presented as an external unattainable. Whereas I would like to think that we are beautiful now. and we are beautiful in process. And that's the joy of being in the kitchen. You get into the groove of it, you start putting on tunes and humming things, and that is why people want to keep creating in whatever form that takes. But yeah, we should be fostering that, and if we can reconcile our relationship to beauty, we can reconcile a lot about ourselves and each other. That's my current contention.
Is this a collection or like a non-fiction kind of deal?
I would say it's a long-form essay, probably.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay, good.
There may be interspersed with some poetry, but yeah.
Good. It's what you're cooking up in the kitchen.
That's it.
You're putting different things on it as well.
Thank you.
John, this has been amazing. If people want to find out more about you or see some of your work or follow some of the various gigs that you're doing, where should they head to?
Yes. So looking up my handle, John E. Poetry, will find me on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram, and Medium. Medium is not regularly updated, so don't bother too hard with that one. I prefer for people not to approach my personal page because typically that's me being an uncle, that's me being a family person.
Yeah.
So yeah, finding me care of Johnny Poetry, if you message me there or you check out my work on YouTubes and the places, I'm endeavoring to keep those places fresh as things come.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
There you go. Lots of good stuff.
Thank you.
John, you got one more piece to share with us tonight?
I do. Thank you. I'm going to share a piece called Get Up, and it was, for a little while, it was my signature piece, and I retired it, but I realized after COVID that it needed to come back out again. Here it is. We were not made to simply stay inside walls, to merely clock in and clock out, day in and day out. We were made for freedom. We were made for story and for art and for adventure. Your life may be a small and fleeting thing, and this world is so large, but we are so much bigger than the space we take up. So wake up, get out, shake doubt off and step out into the day, out into the frame. This world is a canvas. It is being painted new every day. Don't wait for all things to be in place. This right here is your own space. Step outside. Take off your shoes. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Look around you. Breathe in deep. Stretch out wide and let it wrap around you. This right now will never be the same again. Do you hear it? The invitation. The field says, run through me. The hill says, come climb me. The sky says, sing to me. The wind says, soar on me. The rain says, dance in me. The sun says, bask with me. The day says, chase after me. So gather your strength. Step onto your stage. Find your voice. Make your mark. Draw your drawing. Paint your painting. Sing your song. Write your poem. Cook your meal. Use this instrument. Make your art. It might not be the best thing you ever do, but make us believe you. Make your art. Today you play a vital part. So long as it is called today, you are artist, you are audience, you are art. So find your person and your place, and when you do, walk in it, run through it, sing and soar over it, rest on it. Breathe, move, live like it's never been done before. There's so much yet to explore. The best is still in store. There is so much more.
Yes, thank you, mate. Wonder, hope, identity, John Englezos. That's what it's all about. I could see how core that was to you from the fact that you did that by memory and you really embodied it. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming on the show, John. It's been a real privilege.
Thank you, man. Bless you. And all the best with the rest of your interviews.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Catch you.
Weetabix hands, what's that all about?